Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, the Kraken have played a pair of home games now, and coming off of that road trip to start the post-Olympic part of the season, there needs to be a more definitive name for like post-Olympic. Like, I call it the PO timeline. That's probably not good.
No, I'd say not. We'll keep workshopping that, but post-Olympic, I think we'll have to work for now.
Yes, the post-Olympic timeline, they have those two road games, right? Things do not go well, but they come back home, they play at Climate Pledge Arena, they get a good get-right opponent in Vancouver, they take care of business there, and then last night with, as you called it before we started recording, a statement win over the Carolina Hurricanes. They pick up that 2-1 victory. Feels like things are back on track with the team. We said it last week after the Dallas game, right? We weren't going to worry unless things didn't pick up once they were back home. Things did pick up once they're back home. We can all relax. They got a 5-point cushion on a playoff spot now.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. We can all relax. I think they're good now. They found their game, and that was really my only concern coming off the Olympic break is just after the Dallas game, which I gave them a mulligan. St. Louis game, maybe a little concerning, but hey, they found their game, and I think the get-right game against Vancouver was exactly what they needed. I don't know that anybody could lose to Vancouver at this point, and so I still had my questions after that one. But Carolina, they had to play a methodical, mistake-free, and really focused game to have a chance against Carolina. They did exactly that. That is Kraken hockey. That is Lane Lambert hockey. They're back. They are officially back, and if they keep playing like that, they're locked for the playoffs.
Yep. Awesome. Podcast over. That's it. We don't need to say anymore.
Although we've been saying this, like we haven't been
We'll
concerned. We've been saying this for months.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. If we stop now, it'll be our most optimistic podcast ever.
Though there is a little thing called the trade deadline, though.
Yes, that's true. We gotta talk about that. We will talk about that. We'll talk about some of the players and how they're performing right now. Talk about Ty Cartier and what happened with him, and you know, anything else that comes up over the course of the next hour or so. It's because something usually does. But of course, first we got to thank our wonderful sponsor of the podcast, the offices of Rico Tessendor. Now, RJ, one other thing happened when the Kraken returned to Climate Pledge Arena, and that was, of course, everybody getting hat-tricked again. This time, Jordan Eberle, we all thought he had a hat trick, hats on the ice, everybody celebrating. And then when it comes time for the goal announcement, his empty net goal is announced as his second goal of the game. And we're all looking around. And when this happens, I immediately turn to Charles, our friend, and I go, "Oh, Chet messed up on the in-game announcement, right? With the first call of it being his second goal." And then he said it again. And I was like, "Oh, he wouldn't mess up twice, right?" And I should have known better. Chet never messes up with the in-game announcements there. I was like, did he miss the hats on the ice? Like, what are we doing? And so once that second announcement came in, we all like went, okay, something happened. And then of course the announcement of the goal, the scoring change, Matty Beniers. Just
is this all heading towards suing Matty Beniers?
I was gonna say yes, it is, because I was gonna say there are people, and we know because they talked about it on like Discord and stuff. There are people who have lost 2 hats now, thinking that they have hat tricks, and then it gets called back. And yes, the Kraken are doing a great job of taking care of everybody through hats. You get a hat back, right? Like they're giving away free hats to those people again. Good on the Kraken for doing that. But the emotional distress of thinking you've seen a hat trick, something that you can go to a lot of NHL games and never see, and you participate in that by throwing your hat on the ice only for it to be taken away later. And this one especially being a scoring change for a goal that happened about 10 minutes prior in game time, not even like real time, game time. That is something that I feel like somebody should be held responsible for, and I feel like Rico's the guy to do it.
Yeah, you know what? Although, because he is a Kraken fan, though, I don't know this. I
Not
feel like I might
impartial
feel
enough.
conflicted on this.
There
Huh?
might, yeah, there might be, but all the more reason, right? I gotta feel like Rico's probably fired up about this too. It probably knows somebody who would not have the quite the conflict of interest.
There we go.
but but
Going friends.
I mean, somebody else with Rico, right? But yeah, I think I was just like this feels like something somebody could take some sort of action on. Can't just constantly be losing hat tricks like this, right? Like that would be a problem around the league, but to have it happen twice to one team in one season, that's a big deal.
No, definitely need to put a stop to it for sure. And on top of that, too, right after Joey Decord misses the goalie goal by inches,
Right.
talk about emotional distress.
The emotional whiplash that everybody in the building experienced Saturday night was immense, and it was something that I didn't pay money to get in the building because I have my press credential, but I still feel like I deserve something for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I wasn't there. I mean, people could see from the background of the YouTube version. I'm visiting my parents, but my wife was there, and I mean, the roller coaster ride she experienced. Although she did say it was the best Kraken game she's ever been to. She loved it. She had a
Okay.
fantastic time.
It was good, and the Carolina game was good too. A lot of the home games this season have been really really solid, even if you sometimes see weird fluky things like the hats, and you have to go through that emotional whiplash. Kraken have been putting on a good show at home for us on the media side of things, for all the fans, and that of course includes Rico, our boy, who's also there at those games, and getting to experience it all alongside us. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800, or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Now, before we dive into everything, RJ, two quick announcements that you have.
Yes. So the first one, I was thinking about the Kraken game, the great time my wife had at that, and then she also went to the Torrent game the day before. And Dylan and I, we love to cover women's hockey. We cover the Torrent. We have our podcast, The Downpour. We are big women's hockey fans. But you have the chance to see some women's hockey like you've never seen it before. Like I've never seen it before. There is another Oops All Goalies game. For those of you who are not familiar with it, is a game with entirely goalies. It is all goalies out on the ice, 6 goalies out there at once, out there trying to score goals, put on dangles, basically do everything but play goal.
Yeah, not allowed to be in the crease.
Not allowed to be in the crease. That's kind of the one rule. And so it's a great time, fantastic event. Kyle Sorensen puts it on and has done a few of these now, and it's become this viral sensation. Oops All Goalies. And there is an all-female, I believe it's the first all-female Oops All Goalies game happening right here in Seattle, March 7th, 7:30 p.m. at KCI. Free to attend. You could just show up and watch it. It's great entertainment. It's a fantastic time. Highly recommend.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to this one. I know Jen's looking forward to it. She'll be playing in it. I mean, it's gonna be a fun time. They're always really fun. Like anytime you get to see an Oops All Goalie game, it's a ton of fun, and this one's gonna be no different for sure.
And it's very silly. And I think this one has the potential to be the silliest.
It is.
Just knowing some of the people are going to be involved.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And yeah, I hope as many people as possible are able to go and be a part of it.
Yep. And so second announcement, this one, probably not as fun as the Oops All Goalie game, I have to admit, but I think it's still going to be a fun time. And that is my Armchair GM stream tonight, 7 p.m. Thanks everyone, by the way, for understanding. I had to postpone it last time. Just stuff came up visiting my family, but all good here. And I think it actually works out better this way because we are that much closer to the trade deadline. We've got, actually, I'll announce both Armchair GM streams. I've got 2 of them this week. We're doing right before the deadline and then right after the deadline. So tonight, March 3rd, 7 p.m., we're going to talk Kraken trade deadline preview, going to really go in depth, look at some of the moves they could make, look at some of the chatter around the team and the players they're looking into. It's going to be a really good time. And then March 6th, so just 3 days from now, that is trade deadline day. So the trade deadline is at noon. 7 p.m. Going to be another armchair GM stream. We're going to go over everything the Kraken did or did not do at the trade deadline, including reacting to comments from GM Jason Bottrill. I assume we're going to get him that afternoon, so I'm going to go over everything that he says. I'm sure I'll have plenty of questions for him, no matter what the Kraken end up doing. So it's going to be a real good time.
I was gonna say, like, what if the Kraken don't do anything? Do we still get Jason Bottrill? We've never been in that
Yes.
scenario before, but yeah,
Yeah, they've basically stood pat. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
year two, that was kind of the
that's
closest
true.
situation to where we are now. If they stand pat, that's kind of a decision of its own that I think deserves a lot of reaction.
Yeah, definitely. One roster decision was made this week by the Kraken, potentially ahead of the trade deadline. Not necessarily saying that it's signaling anything, but maybe it was. And that was that they did put Ty Cartier on waivers.
Yeah,
And he was claimed by the New York Rangers, has already had a game over there, got there, was it the Broadway hat? There's some name for it,
something like that.
but
Yeah,
but
it's a
first
hat.
first game got their, kind of in the room player of the game thing, their F1 helmet equivalent over there with the Rangers. But Ty Cartier no longer a member of the Kraken organization, RJ.
Yeah, and I know that's disappointing for a lot of fans and for us too, who have great memories of Ty Cartier and especially the way he came onto the scene with the Kraken in the playoffs
Mhm.
year two and scoring a big goal in his first NHL game. I mean, just huge, great memories of Ty Cartier, and so it's disappointing to see him go. I think unfortunately this one was just a numbers game where the Kraken finally got everybody healthy. They had to send somebody down. They just didn't have space on the roster. And so really, I think it kind of came down to Ty Cartier or maybe someone like Jacob Melanson. But I think it even speaks less to Cartier than to some of his teammates. Ben Myers has been playing really well. Jacob
Mhm.
Melanson's been playing really well. I think Cartier just kind of moved down the depth chart because other guys had moved up in front of him. And so the Kraken felt comfortable taking that risk. And the Rangers do take a flyer on him. So I think if we're being realistic here, Cartier was probably the Kraken's, I would say, 14th or 15th best healthy forward. And you can only keep so many.
Yeah, it's one of the realities that the Kraken are going to start to have a little bit more now that so many of their prospects are developing and working their way up through the system. You look at Ryan Winterton this year taking one of the full-time roles with the Kraken, Berkeley Catton taking one of the full-time forward roles with the Kraken, Jacob Melanson probably here to stay at this point. I think
Should be.
it sure seems like he's going to be around. So he's taking over one of those spots. We've seen Yanni Newman up with the Kraken at at the start of the season. This is always kind of the reality of things is you are always going to have that pipeline. The Kraken have finally far enough into their existence that that pipeline is, you know, pumping out players that are able to now play at the NHL level. They're ready for it. And when you have that pipeline going, this is what happens. You end up with too many players. Some guys have to get moved. Some guys, have to get sent down, but placed on waivers. And when that happens, yeah, you run the risk of losing them. I think with Ty Cartier, it was such an incredible journey that everybody was able to see, right? Undrafted free agent comes in, puts in the work in Coachella Valley. Those fans fall in love with him, gets promoted up to the NHL, is able to play a couple years with the Kraken, get in a lot of games, 180 games in a Kraken sweater in the regular season, and then of course the playoff run that you mentioned. I mean, that already I remember was it early last year or maybe even early the year before that, people being like, what's his ceiling? Like, where's he going? And I'm like, look, he's already done it, right? Like he's beaten all of the odds, and we got to see that with him with the Kraken and how incredible that was, and how much of it was, look, just enjoy the journey with this guy because it's such an incredible story, such an incredible person, and you could just feel good about rooting for him. And I know I'll still be cheering for him, even though he's going to be on the Rangers and he's not going to be with the Kraken. But it was really really awesome to see not just him go through that journey and be an undrafted guy and make it, but the Kraken showcasing that, look, we have the ability to assess that talent. We have the ability to develop that talent and nurture it and bring it to the NHL level kind of before they had the opportunity to do that with a lot of their own drafted prospects, right? They were able to do that with Ty Cartier, and then unfortunately Ty Cartier becomes a you know a victim of them doing it with their own drafted talent at this point, as things kind of move up. But yeah, it's an unfortunate reality of the life cycle in the NHL that you're gonna just constantly be producing these young guys that are gonna need roster spots, and that unfortunately means somebody else has to go. And Ty Cartier, I think, is kind of the canary in the coal mine for what we might see over the next couple seasons.
Yeah, and ultimately it is a good thing. It's the normal progression for the Kraken. You said 180 games, and you're right. That really stood out to me. That's a lot of
It's a
games.
lot of games.
And he has actually played more games in a Kraken sweater than Philip Grubauer. I know, skaters and goalies are different, but like, he's top 15 all time in the Kraken as far as games played. So I mean, he certainly made his mark on this franchise in the early years.
Yeah, definitely.
Wishing him the best of luck in New York.
Yep, yep, and yeah, it's gonna be tough, but it's you hope that that he has a lot of continued success in New York, and then yeah, if you're a Kraken fan and you're like, okay, how do I deal with this? Talk to the Coachella Valley fans because they've had to deal with this the last 2 years as all the players they came to love were all cycled out for all the drafted prospects coming through. It's again, it's one of those growing pain things for a young franchise.
Yeah, and not to mention this move itself too. CV fans, I feel so bad for you because not only is Karche, beloved player, now out of the organization. Had he just cleared waivers, he would have been back to CV, and you would have been able to see him again. It's
Yeah.
kind of double rough for the Firebirds fans. We feel for you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But yeah, I mean, speaking about the Kraken roster, RJ, and kind of being as full as it is, I mean, we're seeing a situation right now where, even Ryan Winterton's not getting in the lineup. He hasn't played the last two games. Came out after that road trip. Lane Lambert looking just to kind of shake things up a little bit, wake up the team a little bit. But I mean, they already still have, it feels like, too many forwards, even with Ty Cartier, now with the Rangers.
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's a numbers game again. Where I mean, Ryan Winterton. I think that's kind of how Coach Lambert described it, where it wasn't anything wrong that Ryan Winterton did. The reason for it to get benched or anything like that is just somebody has to sit out, and it just happens to be him.
Yeah. Interesting timing coming off of getting his extension. And I think we should talk about that with both Ryan Winterton and Ben Myers. Both of them get extensions this past week as well. Jason Bottrill and the Kraken organization doing that with both of them. I believe they're both 2-year deals. Ryan Winterton, 1.125. I think
Mhm.
AAV, and then Ben Myers, 2x1 AAV.
Yep, just a million even for Myers there, and I like the extensions for the two of them, just locking down a couple depth pieces, and the key part of that is that both of those contracts are the cap hit is under the variable limit in the AHL, so cap wise, there's really no downside to it. If worst case happens, if they do regress or whatever it is, you need to send them to the minors. There is no cap charge on those contracts if you send them there. The only downside is just the amount of real dollars that you are paying, which is very expensive for someone in the AHL. But there's basically no downside of these deals. You lock down a couple of your depth forwards, and in a way that also, I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about this on the Armchair GM stream tonight, but it's kind of consistent also with the way that the Kraken have maybe tried to waiver proof some of their contracts. And they did try and do it with Ty Karche.
They did.
Wasn't enough. The Rangers were still willing to take a flyer on it, but it's a good way to structure these contracts if you can spare the money, which ownership has shown time and time again. They will spare no expense on these things.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that's an issue for them at all. No, it's just one of those where I think it's also a good signal of from the organization of, look, we're liking what Lane Lambert's doing with this team, what the identity of this team is. And I mean, they should, right? We talked about they have a 5-point playoff cushion right now. This to me was a real signal that okay, we're maybe settling in on an identity and we're making moves to keep two guys that fit into it, right? Ryan Winston, obviously a player you drafted, only 22 years old, probably going to extend him anyway. But by extending Ben Myers as well. It's not just it's well, one for him it's positive because it's the organization saying, "Hey, we notice all the hard work you've been putting in at both levels, the NHL and the AHL level. We really like what you bring," and giving him that acknowledgement. But I really feel like with both of these contracts, RJ, it's them kind of signaling, okay, this Lane Lambert style of hockey is going to be here to stay for a while.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's something that we probably could have assumed, just given the unlikely that they would have a fourth coach in 4 years. Lane Lambert's sticking around, and so
Yeah.
you want to bring in players that fit that style, and Winterton and Myers absolutely fit that style. And I think also it's telling that you have 2 year extensions, particularly for Myers, because Winterton,
Yeah.
he's your homegrown guy, he's an RFA, you have team control. 2 years doesn't surprise me, but 2 years for Ben Myers is far from a given. But I think that speaks to just how well of a fit he's fit in on this Lane Lambert team.
Yeah, exactly. So, congrats to both those guys for earning those extensions. And yeah, I think if you're a Kraken fan, if you've been enjoying what you've been seeing out of the team this year, I think this is a signal that the team wants to just kind of continue that moving forward. Now, somebody else, RJ, that I know a lot of people enjoyed watching him last night and the performance that he had is Jamie Alexiak, who had 11 hits, assuming they didn't do any stat corrections after the game.
Yeah.
But he had 11 hits in the game against Carolina last night. Had a lot of us scratching our heads as to where this performance kind of came from. And so, RJ, kind of asking you, what do you think was going on with Jamie Alexiak last night? I mean, is he gearing up for the playoffs and a playoff run, or is he showcasing for a trade? What was going on there? Because that really kind of became the story of the game for a lot of people.
Yeah, he was uncharacteristically physical. As I mentioned, 11 hits is a career high for Jamie Alexiak. So he has not done that at any point prior in his career. And he just looked like a different player. He looked like a little nasty. He had a
Mhm.
bit of nastiness to his game. And that's something that I know that coaches, GMs, everybody kind of around him had been maybe hoping that he could unlock throughout his entire career. It's kind of what we've heard on the book on him, right? Is that he's got this massive size. If only he could be super physical and unlock it, the type of difference maker he could be. And we absolutely saw that on display last night against Carolina. As for why, because look, I'm not counting on this being a normal thing for him. It's one game out of a whole career for a 33-year-old player. I don't think a switch is going to flip now, after one seemingly random Monday in February, in March. It's March now.
Yeah.
In March, for a 33-year-old player. But I think there might be something to the idea that scouts could potentially be watching. The Kraken probably aren't going to move off a whole lot of their UFAs, but if they do move one, it's probably going to be Jamie Alexiak. And maybe there are some teams out there looking at him in terms of a trade. And either way, his contract's up at the end of the year. I'm sure there are teams scouting potentially for the deadline, but they also might keep him in mind for when free agency hits July 1st. And I think he put on a pretty good showcase for them. If you're a scout and you watch this game, I think you got to love what Jamie Alexiak brought. And again, with all respect to Jamie Alexiak, because I do respect him and his game and everything, I think as a scout, it would be very easy if you just watched that game to kind of get the wrong idea about how he plays, because honestly, he doesn't usually bring a lot of that physicality, but man, he can be a difference maker when he does.
Yeah, so I was with you where all night I was like, okay, just must be showing off for other teams. But then I thought about, well, and you mentioned it earlier before we started recording too, like the game kind of having a playoff vibe from the Kraken.
Yeah.
And so I went and I looked up what his hitting stats are come postseason time, right? The few times he's been on postseason runs, including with the Kraken year two, does he elevate his game physically? And he actually really does, like very significantly. So,
Uh,
as a regular season player, when it comes to hits, his two biggest regular season hitting years, you're talking about, and this is unbelievably rough math, so don't, totally get on me for it, roughly 2.5 hits per game. That being like his absolute peak for regular seasons. In there are years like last year where he had less than one hit per game. Okay, he played 82 games last year. He had
As a
74
defensive
hits
defenseman who's
as a
playing, yeah,
defensive
big
defenseman,
minutes.
right? Now he blocked 159 shots in those 82 games. Like he blocked shots for sure. That we
Oh, yeah,
know
he brings
about
the
him.
blocks every time,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the hitting numbers have not always been there for him. Again, you're talking about like a regular season high for a season of roughly 2.5. Then you look at his postseason numbers. And certainly, if you look at the last two times he's in the postseason, that was in 1920 with Dallas when they went on their run in the bubble to go to the Stanley Cup Finals, which forget even happens a lot. And in on that postseason run, he played 27 games. He had 117 hits. So a little higher than, 2.5 hits per game there. And year two with the Kraken, they played 14 postseason games. He had 63 hits in those 14 games. So again, talking about a number that's significantly higher than what he has in the regular season. And so I'm wondering, RJ, if maybe just the fact that the Kraken are hanging around in a playoff spot and he's thinking about the playoffs, whether it's with the Kraken or somebody else, he's just trying to get himself into that playoff mindset. And that playoff mindset for Jamie Alexiak is to go out there and play more physically than he normally does in the regular season.
Interesting. And I think that's probably a good point. And I think one of the reasons that maybe we have this opinion of Jamie Alexiak as, kind of the regular season Jamie Alexiak, where he doesn't hit very much, is because, I mean, if you're a Kraken fan and you've watched him just play for the Kraken, and that's mostly where I've seen him, just play for the Kraken, that would mean that I did the math, 97% of the time you've seen him as regular season Jamie Alexiak, and 3% you've seen him as playing in the playoffs. And so I guess that would make sense. But I was talking to you about this before we started recording, because we were just talking about the Carolina game, and it felt like the Kraken treated that game like a playoff game. Like they played playoff style hockey, and they put that level of effort in against Carolina. I think it's also, as an aside, I think that's also one of the reasons that Carolina keeps getting bounced in the playoffs every year, is because all it takes is playing a playoff style game, and then their strategy of just spamming a billion low quality shots just doesn't work anymore. But credit to the Kraken for playing that way. And I think Jamie Alexiak kind of led the charge there in playing a playoff style game. Again, not sustainable over 82 regular season games. Nobody can do it that way, but he showed the kind of difference maker he can be. And so I do wonder, there weren't that many scouts in the building. I think there were only 5 teams of scouts in the building, but if the right person was watching that game, I wonder if a GM tries to make Jason Botterill an offer that really tempts him.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, their last game before the Olympic break, 0 hits for Jamie Alexiak. For all their games since coming back, 3, 3, 2, and then the 11. So we'll see if that trend kind of continues. Again, the 11 is probably high.
Yeah, that's not
I
gonna be
don't think.
repeatable, no.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be something he does all the time. He's not Jacob Melanson or anything.
I'm saying Melanson actually could do that.
But if he averages 3 or 4 hits, kind of throughout the rest of the regular season, I would say that that's a sign that he's just getting ready for playoff hockey, and that come playoff time, Jamie Alexiak just kind of turns it on. And again, not like a ton of playoff experience for him in his career, 57 total playoff games for him up to this point. But when he's gotten there, he has cranked up the physicality quite a bit. And so I am genuinely curious. And again, it could be both things. He could be getting ready for the playoffs, regardless of if he's going to be with the Kraken or somebody else, and he's just kind of doing that in his mind, or he's getting ready for the playoffs. Ever doesn't want me to bring it up.
Would you say he has that dog in him?
He's got that dog in him, yeah. Or he's getting ready for the playoffs, and he's trying to showcase, look, I can do this come playoff time to somebody else. So we'll never know, but I think either way, if you're Kraken fans, I think whether he's still with the team past Friday, I think tomorrow, that game on Wednesday, I think might see, something closer to what we saw yesterday than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And on the flip side, with the teams looking at him, I don't know, if I'm Jason Botterill, maybe it gives me second thoughts about maybe moving him if I was thinking about it. Because if I was him, I wouldn't.
I know. I mean, going into yesterday's game, he had played 57 games this season, and he would have had 77 hits in the 57 games, right? Like with the 11, he's only up to 88 on the year, which would put him fourth on the Kraken. The 88 number is fourth on the Kraken behind Ty Cartier, Jacob Latza, and Eli Tolvanen. So, it does put him in the pole position amongst defensemen.
Yeah, that's wow. How many other teams have their top 3 hits leaders being forwards?
I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I guess
it's not that uncommon.
Yeah. Adam Larsson was in that spot kind of all year, but again, you get 11 in a game. That's it's quite a few. He was able to jump out of Larsson for that title amongst Kraken defenders. But yeah, it was a very notable performance from Jamie Oleksiak, and again, one that I know a lot of people were really happy to see. So definitely had to bring it up here on the podcast.
Yeah, he should have been first star. Also, if it was up to me, he would have been first star. He wasn't one of the 3 stars, was he?
No. Big Cat was. Adam Larsson was. He had 2 assists, so he was one of the stars. But
that's fine. He can be one of the stars. Jamie Oleksiak should have been first star.
Yeah. I honestly, I would have been down with that too. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we get to the trade deadline stuff, RJ?
Dylan, you know me. Right. I will get to the trade deadline stuff as soon as I possibly can.
All right, then go for it. I hand the podcast over to you. Let's talk trade deadline.
Yes. Okay, let's talk trade deadline. I mean, the first of several hours of talking trade deadline today for me with the Armchair GM stream coming up tonight. So first I want to talk about, I guess, the Kraken's mindset going into the trade deadline. I think this Carolina game was really important for that, because if they dropped the Carolina game, you kind of lost 3 of 4 coming out of the Olympic break. You're in the position where you have one more game left until the trade deadline. If you somehow find a way to lose against St. Louis tomorrow, you might have second thoughts about where this team is in their playoff position. But with that win over Carolina, you're 5 points clear of the final playoff spot. I think it's pretty clear you're destined to make the playoffs. And so the Kraken, I think we can pretty safely say, Dylan, will not be sellers at the deadline. That is out, and that's consistent with reporting that we're seeing. Like David Pagnotta said something to the effect of the Kraken were not going to look to move their UFAs. Instead, they would look to either like re-sign them or to add something. So I think that's going to be the mindset. How much they add or what they add still remains to be seen, but there's no way they're selling off.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Again, feels like the team for the first time kind of has an identity that they seem to, as a whole organization, be going all in on. It would be, and to find yourself, with a 5-point playoff cushion for a franchise that doesn't regularly get there, I think it would be kind of crazy if they did sell off at this point.
Yeah, you've already made that decision a long time ago. When you hired Lane Lambert as a coach, when you made the effort that you were going to go for it this season, that decision's been made over and over already. You have to go for it. That's not the interesting question now, though, because that one is clear. They're not selling. The interesting question is, how much do they buy? Or do they buy at all? Do they stand pat? Do they try and make a minor move? Or do they try and make a major move? And there are certainly some major players out there that are in trade discussions that the Kraken could go after. I'll say this, and I'll leave you room to disagree here if you have another take. But I think for the Kraken, it only makes sense if they are taking the big swing to make a move. We just talked about Ty Cartier and the waiver situation, how they already have kind of too many healthy depth forwards. I think adding another depth forward doesn't really do you any good. Adding really any kind of defenseman doesn't do you a whole lot of good, because you're kind of set there on the blue line. You already have plenty of depth defensemen. So the only move I think that makes sense for the Kraken is taking a big swing for a difference-making forward. Do you agree?
Yeah, the only way I see it differently is just if that's the only thing they could do, just wanting to send the message by adding somebody, right? Even if you just add somebody to be a scratch, because we've seen teams do that in the past.
We have. I just think one of the issues is, okay, then who are you sending down just for the, although actually at the trade deadline, actually I should mention this too. Post-trade deadline, there are no roster size limits. So you can have as many players as you want on the roster, so long as the roster fits under the salary cap. I should also mention the Kraken have plenty of salary cap space to play with.
Yeah,
they have as much space as they could possibly need to add anybody they'd want to need. So the contracts aren't going to be an issue there in the short term. So I guess you could add somebody, for depth basically. You could even like, send a Jacob Melanson down temporarily and to get the roster spot and then
Or
bring him right back
Winterton,
up.
yeah,
Or Winterton. So
because their
yeah,
waivers exempt. Just to throw that out there.
yes. So you could do that, not risk losing them and add somebody there. But I think the real moves to look out for the Kraken are the big swings. And that's kind of
Mhm.
where they've been mentioned. I haven't heard the Kraken really connected to any depth forwards. I don't know if you have. I certainly haven't seen
No.
any of the reports out there.
No, and again, I don't think it's likely. It's just that if it comes down to maybe not doing anything versus doing something, we've seen general managers in the past go ahead and make a minor move just to be like, I did something on the day. I don't know that Jason Botterill will be that guy. We'll find out because it's going to be his first time in charge of the Kraken.
Yeah. And it'll be a good indication too of like how much they care about the optics of that too, of being buyers versus standing pat. It's something you could kind of sell to the fans, whereas if you stand pat, it's like, well, they were in between the buyers and sellers. Whereas I don't know that that's really the case and the mindset really. I think they're in go for it mode.
Right.
It's just what makes sense to buy.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting conversations are around the big name players that are out there. And I kind of just want to go player by player if we can,
Mhm.
of guys that either have been connected to the Kraken through reports or rumors or things like that, or maybe some guys that haven't, that we can, kind of speculate on or look at. But I want to start with kind of the obvious one. We've talked about him already. It's the gut feeling move that I have, and that's Jordan Kyrou.
Mhm.
Seems like he's still out there. It also seems like from the Blues perspective, it seems like they're going to be bigger sellers maybe than some anticipated. A lot of talk today about how they're looking to move Jordan Binnington. Now, Kraken obviously won't be in on that, but I think it speaks to just how much the Blues are looking to tear things down.
Yeah, it sounds like it's yeah, Binnington, we're hearing Kyrou, we're hearing Robert Thomas. You move those guys if you're really truly starting over, right? Particularly Robert Thomas. And the fact that it does feel like that is something that could happen means that yeah, St. Louis is looking to essentially start over.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're looking to do. Now let's talk about Kyrou and Robert Thomas because there's a couple intriguing options from St. Louis. I think we've talked about Kyrou a lot already in past weeks. I think he's probably the best just one-to-one fit for the Kraken. He is a skilled winger, scoring winger who can score 30 goals. He's made a lot of big strides defensively too. Like his defensive game has really improved. And so he's just solid all around the ice. I think he's a perfect fit for this team. And I think the price is also, it might be lower than you might think for a player of his caliber. So Kyrou is the one that I would ideally like to see. I think you're probably agreed on that.
Yeah, I mean, for a couple of reasons. One, like this year withstanding because he's had these trade rumors circulating around him all year, and St. Louis has just massively struggled. But you look at his goal totals for his previous 3 seasons, and you're talking 37, 31, 36. Right? It would be great to have somebody who's a consistent 30-plus goal scorer for the Kraken. And also, RJ, according to our friend Zame over at Davy Jones Locker Room, third most goals amongst active players against the Seattle Kraken. He scored when they were in St. Louis the other day. So you'd be able to take somebody who has been a Kraken killer and, bring him into the fold, and you wouldn't have to worry about facing Jordan Kyrou anymore. Somebody who has kind of consistently gotten it done whenever he's played them.
That'd be a nice little benefit. I remember at the watch party at Moss Bay Hall, we were saying after he scored, they'll take him back, back.
If you traded for him then, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that is true. If you traded for him before that game, but they've got another opportunity with the game against St. Louis tomorrow. So maybe Kyrou can just stay behind in Seattle. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So I think Kyrou is kind of the obvious fit. As far as a return for Kyrou, I mean, I would have to think that Shane Wright would have to be part of it. It's basically what we've been saying, be Wright plus something else. It'd be amazing if they were able to do it without Shane Wright involved. I just don't know that the Blues would accept anything that didn't have Shane as part of it.
That would be my guess as well, right? Like you're probably circling Shane, depending on their timeline for their rebuild. Maybe they say Berkeley Catton just because he's a little younger and that fits in better with their timeline as they're starting the teardown now rather than being a little further along. But I would assume that their ask is going to be one of those two guys.
Yeah, I'd have to think so. And still, I'd be willing to do it. Certainly for Shane Wright plus, I'd do that package. Berkeley Catton, I might hesitate a little bit more on just
Same.
because Catton fits your timeline more. And I think he does have 30 goal potential the way that we're
Hmm.
seeing him play so far. So I would try and do something based around Shane Wright. Now, Robert Thomas is interesting because I think Robert Thomas is a better player than Jordan Kyrou. He's at a
Agreed.
more valuable position generally. He's a center. I think he's probably a low end 1C in the
Hmm.
NHL. I think if he's your 1C, you need a pretty good 2C. But the Kraken, I think, would have that. If he's your 2C, like you're a cup contender. Like
Hmm.
Robert Thomas is very good. High 80s point pace last couple seasons. So he can score. He's legitimate 1C. Now, question for you though, Dylan. He's a center.
Yeah.
Kraken don't exactly need more centers. Look, anybody could use a Robert Thomas. And I
Hmm.
think Robert Thomas would instantly be the best player the Kraken have ever had. So
Hmm.
I don't think they should worry about the position element there, especially since if you're getting him, you are certainly sending a center back St. Louis's way, a young center. Should the Kraken be in on Robert Thomas? Would that make sense to you?
It depends on how they feel about Shane Wright, I think, ultimately, right? And whether or not they want to accelerate the timeline a little bit with their team and be more of a consistent playoff team and say that, look, we have really good defensive center in Matty Beniers, somebody who's, still figuring out the offensive side of things, but is getting better there. Seems to be more on track offensively this year. You got Chandler Stevenson, who, again, is somebody who can contribute offensively, but we know kind of what the ceiling is there for him. 50-point-ish guy. That's just who he's been in Vegas. That's who he's been here. Nothing to sneeze at, but it is limited. I think you look at it and you go, look, if we want to be legitimate contenders, particularly in a Pacific division that I will bring up again, has three of the top five centermen in the National Hockey League and four of the top 10, like you need a center to be able to compete in this division. And all of those guys are under 30, by the way. So you need to have somebody that's going to be able to compete for a while against, the on the low end, Leo Carlson. Right on the high end, you're talking Jack Eichel, Macklin Celebrini, and Connor McDavid. Like these guys are all in your division. They're fantastic. You have to find a way to be able to match with them if you want to be consistently in the playoff conversation. And I think that that's going to be the long-term challenge for the Kraken. And if you're the Kraken, you look at things, you go, look, we don't have a center right now that can consistently compete against those guys. Robert Thomas, I think would be if you're ranking all of the centers, he's fifth, but he gives you a much better chance and the ability to then let your depth put in more of the work in any sort of, first round playoff matchup against any of those guys, right? Where you could throw Matty Beniers out there to try to shut down that other team's top center, and then you're rolling two lines of Robert Thomas and Chandler Stevenson to try to outscore the depth on those other teams. That's a good spot to be in all of a sudden. But I think you do need that Robert Thomas who can be a point per game player. Like that's the one thing the Kraken have always missed is somebody who can be a point per game player. And you look at Robert Thomas, not only is he a point per game player, I mean, just to put it in perspective, he had over 20 goals last year. He had 60 assists in 70 games. Like we're talking about offensive production that the Kraken have just never come close to having a player get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at age 26 too, fits your timeline roughly. That shouldn't scare you away. He's on a great contract, actually same contract as Kyrou at just north of $8 million till 2031. I think the Kraken should absolutely be interested in Thomas. The issue is that the price to acquire him would be significantly higher, I believe,
Yeah.
than Jordan Kyrou. And there's a lot of teams out there, whether it's Buffalo, there's a lot swirling around Thomas and Buffalo right now, or Utah, that have some real serious pieces they could offer back to St. Louis. I mean, if it's Buffalo, Owen Power and some other things they could offer. If it's Utah, you've got different pieces like
Take your pick.
Take your pick. They've got so many great prospects that they could give to St. Louis. So I think in order to have a competitive offer, you probably need to include two of Shane Wright, Berkeley Catton, or Jake O'Brien, I would think. And at that point, Dylan, would you still do it?
Yeah, I mean that's what Jeff Merrick said too today on his show. The
Yeah, Jeff
Sheet.
Merrick connected the Kraken and
we're
Robert
seeing.
Thomas.
Yeah, I think that I probably do it. particularly if it's Shane and Jake O'Brien. Because I think with Shane, you have the questions and the struggles to get him to be able to move up the lineup, right? To get him to play well enough to try to carve out ice time against Matty Beniers and Chandler Stevenson, and that's just been really tough for him to do. And he's just always going to be limited until he gets that that legitimate opportunity to go out there and be the guy. And I just don't think that it's in the cards certainly this year, and I don't know that it's in the cards either the next couple seasons with Seattle. So if you're talking about Shane Wright just kind of stuck being a 3C and his development largely stalling, which is what it looks like, yeah, I think you go ahead and you move him because he's not going to be doing you a ton of good by you keeping him, right? And then with like Jake O'Brien, if you were to package the two of them together, obviously Jake O'Brien is somebody who has immense potential. The hockey sense is off the charts. I firmly believe that's the number one thing that any prospect can have. It's the one thing you can't teach. It is absolutely incredible with him, but he has a lot of other holes to his game that people have talked about that I've broken down on prospect chats and stuff when we look at tape with him. And there's enough there that, look, it did cause him, despite his incredible scoring pace, to not be a top 5 pick in the draft, to not be a part of Canada's World Junior team. There are kind of questions there about how well-rounded his game could end up. I think you go ahead and if that's a prospect that St. Louis is interested in, as much as he could absolutely develop into a very legitimate, high-producing NHL center, I think that it's not a for sure enough for me. So I would go ahead and like leave him available and do a package of those two guys for a guy who is 26 and is already extremely legitimate at the NHL level in Robert Thomas.
Yeah, I think I would too. And Dylan, you're the prospects guy. You've been watching Jake O'Brien closer than I have. What do you think, if you had to put a percentage odds on it, that Jacob, I know it's a long ways out, but that Jake O'Brien ultimately becomes an 85-point player?
It's really tough, especially because like right now they're moving him to the wing. And
Yeah.
so you don't even know like then potentially long-term center stuff.
So I guess you could handicap it too and say, what are the odds he becomes an 85-point center?
Right.
Because
And
that's what Robert Thomas is now.
exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. And I think with any prospect, outside of the true guys where you just know definitively they're going to turn into something, right? Like those first overall guys in select years, not even every first overall pick. I think you're always talking about what are the odds they turn into an 85-point player. At best, like 65% probably. So outside of the superstar guys. So I think it's always worth going after the already proven person over the potential of the prospect. I think general managers oftentimes, and fan bases too, can think about potential, but when you're talking about, guys picked in the top 10 that become 85-point centers in the National Hockey League, eh, maybe one per draft. Like it's not a
Yeah.
lot.
No, it's not. And so that's why I would ultimately be willing to make that move, is because I just, when you calculate the odds of O'Brien becoming that, which he totally could be, he's got that potential, but you're taking a chance there. And then you also, just like you said, Shane Wright, if you keep doing this, he's not going to have success in Seattle. And I don't think the team is going to change their mind on how they're trading him. I think it's worth it to me. I still think the Kraken would really struggle to have a competitive package they could put together for Robert Thomas, just because Utah, Buffalo, like they don't have an Owen Power they can offer. Like the single best player in the trade, Buffalo can beat them with that and Owen Power. Utah can probably beat them with some of their prospects. So it's going to be tough. But I think the Kraken, if St. Louis is willing to listen, the Kraken should be interested.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the only thing that St. Louis that would be competitive with potentially some of the other offers would be a package built around Catton. And I don't know that the Kraken would be willing to go there.
Yeah. Real quick, would you be willing to go there?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I shouldn't have brought it up. I mean, look, he's already scoring at like a 0.25 point per game pace, but that includes a lot of the early season stuff where he wasn't scoring a ton. Granted, he's not scoring a ton now. Like, what are the odds that he hits 85? I mean, well, one, you're talking about a winger in Catton, probably long term. Like, there's no room for him down the middle with this team, so he's probably going to be on the wing. If I didn't
I would,
have to, if the package around him wasn't too much, yeah, I'd consider it.
yeah, I was gonna say I might do Catton and Wright. I wouldn't do Catton and O'Brien.
Yeah.
So that's the trade off there. One more thing on the St. Louis guys before we move on. If I'm St. Louis, one player that the Kraken have that I could totally see St. Louis wanting, he just fits the archetype of what Doug Armstrong likes to look for with the Blues forwards, is Yanni Newman.
Mm-hmm.
Big guy, big body who can shoot. Like, he just screams Blues forward to me.
Yeah.
And the Kraken, again, like, where's the spot for him under a Lane Lambert system? I just think the fit, it's gonna be a real struggle to find the fit there. He's already playing in the AHL. We've talked about it plenty. Like, he should be in the NHL. He is too good for the AHL right now. But if you're gonna play Lane Lambert hockey, I don't know where you have a spot for him. And so, like, let's say in a Kyrou deal, I could see maybe Wright and Newman maybe going the other way. And if I'm St. Louis, that is absolutely who I'm asking for as a secondary piece.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see about that, because you have Yanni Newman, I think, again, I think he should be on the Kraken roster and he should be scoring goals for them, but with the Lane Lambert system and everything and the identity that they're kind of building out for themselves, the team that they're embracing, the front office is embracing. Yeah, I don't know what the plan can be for him long term. So I think you have to consider moving him while he's still young and has potential value, right? And that means and I mean specifically value around the idea of potential. Not that he has no,
Yeah. The
theoretical
value
potential.
is real. Yes. It's based on potential.
Right. And I think also I think about like Jagger Firkus, who's roughly a point per game player right now in Coachella Valley. I think he deserves at some point a call up this year just to see what he can do at the NHL level. But I think about him and I go, what's his potential long-term future if Lane Lambert's the coach and this is the identity of the team and stuff? Because, look, he's a hardworking guy. He can back check a little bit, but he's not going to come up and be able to do what, Jacob Melanson does, right? Like, all, 5'8", 160 pounds of him isn't going to be able to make that kind of impact. And I think even if he's in the right spots in Lane Lambert's system, I don't know that he'll be able to physically pull off the things that is going to be asked of him. And so I wonder about a Jagger Firkus as well. And I think that if you're the Kraken, you have those two pieces and you can say, look, these guys don't fit our, outlook for the next couple years, but they have a ton of value. They are producing at the AHL. These guys are NHL ready at this point and have already have a proven track record of producing all the way through up into the AHL level. And I would be selling other teams on those guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. And certainly Firkus, if you have the opportunity to throw him in and get some value there. Newman, I'd be a little bit more, again, I don't see the future with a Lane Lambert system, but I love the player so much and I need to get rid of him. But it's just one of those things. You've chosen to go in a certain direction and so you have to make decisions based on that. So, but I could totally see other teams, especially St. Louis, maybe wanting a Yanni Newman. So I want to throw that out there in case, that comes together in, say, a Jordan Kyrou trade. Next name I want to talk about, and this one I think is really interesting, that we have heard the Kraken connected to from a few reporters, Elias Pettersson.
Mm-hmm.
The Vancouver Canucks. Now, he's someone that we've talked about for the last few years, really, because there's always been drama swirling around Vancouver, back to when he and JT Miller were feuding. Would they move him? The Canucks are kind of going full rebuild. It looks like they might be willing to move him. Would they do it to a team so close and in their division? Now, before this year, I would say absolutely not. But now, given the kind of prolonged rebuild they're going into, maybe that's something that they look into or that they think about. And Pettersson's interesting because he'd certainly be, you could call it a buy low. He certainly has not been himself really the last few years, but as a young player, I mean, this is a guy who has put up 100 points in the NHL before as a 24-year-old, over a point per game player as a 25-year-old. Last 2 seasons, he hasn't been himself, both offensively and defensively. He's just looked like a shell of his former self, which is rare to see in a player that is still 27 years old. Should, in theory, have a lot of time left. And I bet you a change of scenery would do him well wherever he would go, particularly if it was to a less hectic media market. I
Mhm.
think that would also help him, probably on the mental side. That said, he is a center. We've talked about the difficulties with centers and maybe less of a sure thing than Robert Thomas. Should the Kraken be in those conversations? Is he a player that the Kraken should look at?
Again, if you could guarantee to me that he goes back to 30 plus goal scorer, 100 point ish guy, yeah, absolutely. Kraken should be interested in that. Those guys just don't go on the market very often. Um, I I think there's enough questions around how much of that he still has in him, unfortunately. I also think about, would Seattle be enough of a change of scenery, right? And I don't just mean like, oh, the weather's the same because you're talking about like 100 miles. I mean like Vancouver media would just drive down
Oh
to
God, they
see
would,
how
wouldn't
he's
they?
doing, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not far enough away, I feel like, from the media market that they wouldn't constantly be trying to drag him back into it. I think
Could we just, like, you and I, could we just like distract them and talk to them like
could
and
try.
during the scrum or something and just get them away from him?
I could try. But I just think that if he's going somewhere and is gonna have the best chance to really truly like mentally reset and love the game and all of that kind of stuff, I feel like he has to be further away from Vancouver than Seattle is. I just think geographically it's just too close.
I'm with you on that. That said, I would still be interested and I would still want to be in those conversations. I know you're taking a risk there, but it's a risk I think is worth taking. And the reason I think he's such a good fit for the Kraken is because his value, I think, is, I mean, it's difficult to say what his value is because the elephant in the room here is his contract.
Right.
He's under contract for 11.6 million a year through the year 2032. That is certainly more than the player worth. He's not worth that given the player he's been the last couple of years. If he goes back to 30 goal score, 100-point player, he's worth that. But then even then, it's a lot of money,
Mhm.
and he's maybe worth just a little bit more than that. So you're probably going to be overpaying compared to what you're getting production wise, even if he does bounce back to an extent. That said, the Kraken can absolutely afford that. That's why they wanted to throw over 14 million a year at Artemi Panarin. The Kraken have all the cap space. They don't need to worry about that sort of thing. This is a kind of move where I think, okay, the Kraken are well positioned for it because I think his contract might hold a lot of teams back from giving a big offer. And it's a chance to acquire a player without potentially giving up a ton of prime assets. I do really wonder what the value is there for him because it sounds like the Canucks are not interested in retaining either.
Yes.
And so how many teams want to take on the full freight of that contract for that length of time? I don't know. I think that's going to whittle down the market.
I mean, it sounds like it basically has meant that there is no market.
Right.
Uh,
It sounds like there's not a ton of demand there for the full contract. And
right.
so, like, if I'm the Kraken and you can get a player like that on the cheap with very little in terms of assets going out, and you could keep Jake O'Brien and you could keep Berkeley Catton and you could keep a lot of these players that maybe you couldn't if you were trading for Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou, maybe it's worth looking into.
It's
And it
worth
doesn't even stop you necessarily from also making, say, a Jordan Kyrou deal.
right. It's worth looking into, particularly if you could like do a package of essentially like AHLers. Right? If you're just like, look, Vancouver, we're taking the whole contract. You don't have to deal with it. You get Jagger Fergus, Yanni Newman, and pick one other guy.
Yeah.
Like that might be a pretty attractive offer for Vancouver if they know that, look, Pedersen's just not going to produce here ever again.
You could throw
Right?
in you could throw in a first also. You got surplus first round
Yeah,
picks.
exactly. Yeah, and a first round pick. Like that might be enough to get it done just because if you're Vancouver, you have to look at the situation and say every year that goes by and he gets closer to 30, the value drops. Every year that he goes by and he doesn't produce like he used to, the value definitely drops. And what are the odds that he's going to turn it around while we're rebuilding? Like extremely low. Like he needs to be out of this market. And so you could potentially really kind of do a steal there. And then look, if you're the Kraken, you either get him and he does go back to his former self and he is able to produce, in which case, yeah, you got the steal of a lifetime and you're talking about this being one of the top trades in NHL history. And on the other side, if he doesn't, and he's just kind of like a 50-point player, well, then you can build around the idea that, look, we don't have the high end center, but we have 3 50-point centers. And very few teams can say that. And you can just kind of roll around that level of depth. And like there is something to be said for that. I don't love the contract in that scenario, right? Like if
It's
that's
tough.
the things turn out their worst scenario, I think that's really tough because I think that then does mean that maybe it makes it a little bit more difficult the next time a legit star player is available and you're trying to make that big swing for them. All of a sudden the money and the contracts all start adding up.
I don't even think it does. I
Well,
really don't. I think the Kraken could comfortably fit like 2 of those deals.
yeah, but it takes away one of those two spots. And
Yes.
if you think that it's more likely than not that he's just a 50.3C for you, then is that
Well, yeah, if
worth
you believe
taking up
that,
one
you
of
don't
those
make the deal.
spots?
Yeah.
Right. I know, but I'm just saying like that's something you have to ask yourself. And I don't again, I think if we're talking about a team that is 1,000+ miles away from Vancouver, I think I could more easily talk myself into it. I would just be too worried about everything, and with the situation not being different enough for him here in Seattle.
I think that's a legitimate worry. I get that. I totally get that. And it's part of the risk built in. Still a risk I'd be willing to take given what else is out there, just personally. Now looking at some of the other players here, I mean, I've seen them talked about just a little bit in terms of other centers. And now this is where it doesn't make any sense to me. Robert Thomas and Pedersen, I understand those two as centers, even though the Kraken don't really need to add centers because the skill and the potential or just real ability is there. Anything further down, I've seen them like with talked about with Trocheck, which he doesn't even want to go west, so there's no point
Yeah,
in that. Like that
yeah,
doesn't make any sense. Nazem Kadri, I've seen the Kraken mentioned with him. That makes no sense.
yeah,
So any other center besides Thomas Pedersen or a star center that just nobody's talking about, that doesn't make any sense to me. You'd agree with that, right?
yeah, 1,000%.
And then as far as other like scoring wingers, it's tough because you look at the guys on the market and there's not a whole lot of like true next level difference makers. You're just kind of adding more middle six wingers, and I don't know if that's what they need to do.
Right, I agree. I don't think it's what they should do.
And so, I mean, I've seen someone like Patrick Laine talked about. I don't think he'd be a fit for the Lane Lambert system.
No.
I'm looking at other wingers like who else is there, like Owen Tippett potentially talked about. I mean, we've talked about like Lafreniere, but these are all middle six type of guys. I just don't see anybody that is being talked about on the market that is good enough, that really moves the needle beyond the middle six guys they already have.
Yeah, the only scenario where I think any of that happens is if the front office really believes in that other player long term and they go, look, we're going to bring this person in because we believe in adding that player and having them over re-signing Jaden Schwartz,
Well, that's
right?
someone like a
Over
Jake DeBrusk, if we're looking at
right.
Vancouver, where he's in year 2 of 7 on his contract at 5.5. That's roughly what Jaden Schwartz, would cost. You could say, okay, there's a younger replacement for him.
Right, exactly. So I think like those would be the kind of guys in the scenario that the Kraken front office would do a deal with, just because like that's how they would have to be thinking about it.
Yeah. And then I guess for this year, then you get to have both of them and it adds to your,
Right.
just the depth of a group of forwards that you have. But I'd still be surprised to see a deal like that.
Agreed.
So I think that covers just about all our bases, I think, on the potential trade players they could trade for. Who knows? Kraken could always surprise us. But I mean, I think overall at the deadline, like what's your best case scenario? What are you hoping to see? Like if it goes exactly as you'd hope, aside from like, McDavid for a 7th round pick or something, aside from those kind of dreams, like realistically, what would you want to see ideally?
Probably just the Jordan Kyrou trade for not like a ton. I think, yeah, again, Robert Thomas, realistically best player you could bring in, and I think that he does fundamentally change the franchise. But I think that ultimately what it's probably going to be too steep and there's going to be too much competition, and I don't think the Kraken are going to kind of go there. But I want them to go ahead and pull off a big trade, right? Like I think that is something that if the Kraken could do it while they're in a playoff spot and really shore up things this year instead of just kind of punting on it till the off season, I think that that would go a long way with fans. It would go a long way just kind of signaling what this, kind of new look front office is all about and what the kind of identity of that front office is going to be moving forward. And I think that in the NHL, if you want to be successful, you absolutely have to draft and develop first and foremost. But secondly, you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to pull the trigger on big deals when players you think can be difference makers are available. And I think you look at all of the cup winning teams of the last 10, 15 years, and that has been something that they have all had in common is when a player of a certain level becomes available, they say, yeah, we do love this kid that we drafted high in the draft, but you know what? We're going to make this deal. And I think at some point the Kraken are going to need to get there. And I kind of want them to show that they can operate that way a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to see it just really for the first time in franchise history. And I think that's one of the big reasons that Ron Francis is not the GM anymore, that he's not the one who's kind of making the day-to-day conversations with that, is that he never pulled off the big trade. It's just not something that he ever did or wanted to do. And so this is a good opportunity for Jason Botterill to show that he's going to run things differently than Ron Francis would have. And I think that would go a long way for the fans, for the energy around the organization as a whole. So I'm with you. I think what I'd ideally like to see is the Kyrou deal for a little cheaper than I thought it was going to be.
Yep.
So that would be the dream deadline. I don't think it's the end of the world if they stand pat. I think that would be fine. That would be acceptable. Other than that, I think the only thing I really wouldn't want to see is if they were to go and acquire somebody who I felt wasn't a true difference maker and give up, someone like a Catton or an O'Brien in that deal. I think it's hard to screw up this deadline. It's hard to do a bad job because I think standing pat is fine.
Yeah.
Taking that big swing, I think we'd both be okay with it as long as the price is reasonable. I think they're in a good position here.
Yeah, I do too. And again, if nothing ends up happening come Friday, I don't think we're going to be, we're not going to be like, wow, they're blowing their chance in their window, right? To do something here. Like, we're not going to be critical of the idea of nothing happening. If anything, it's just like, we'd just love to know the story of like, okay, yeah, is St. Louis not willing to deal? What was the ask just way too high? Like what was kind of going on there? But yeah, it's not going to be a problem on either of our fronts.
Right. I guess the other last thing to mention too, with Kyrou and Thomas talking about those, if they are dealt elsewhere, they do have full no trade clauses. So they would have to okay any destination. So that's another thing that could potentially hold up. It wouldn't be for the Kraken's lack of trying necessarily.
Right.
It could just be the player found had a destination option that they preferred. So that's a whole other element to it. So we'll keep an eye out for it. I mean, I think that's the big thing you want to watch as a Kraken fan is watch Kyrou, watch Thomas, to a much lesser extent, watch Pettersson, see what the talk around those guys is. And, maybe hope if they are dealt, then it's to the Kraken.
Yep, exactly. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Deep Dive. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, one more time for sponsoring the podcast. While we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point, someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.